In my early 20s, I have this distinct memory of being in this deep learning phase around both spirituality and regenerative agriculture, and just like soaking everything up like a sponge and reading book after book and listening to videos and talks and all the things. And you'd kind of expect, looking at this time period, just like, oh, what bliss I should have been in as someone who loves to learn and considers themselves a forever student. But I actually felt so stuck and unhappy during this time period, and it wasn't until much later I realized what was going on. And that was, as creative beings, to only take things in, actively take things in, is such an incredibly imbalanced way to be. So I wrote about in my book, Regenerative Business, the idea of being a prosumer, which is the balance of being a producer and a consumer. This is a very needed identity or archetype for us all to take on in this age of wild, unbridled consumption. When we produce as much as we consume, or in better balance, and I'm not only talking about physical things, I'm also talking about information, we actually get to live out as the creators and creatives that all humans are meant to be. Now, when I wrote Regenerative Business, I really thought I was like 60,000 words later, I really thought I was done learning about, writing about, talking about the topic. I was like, well, I wrote the book on it, we're good to go, which is also so silly. There is endless things to learn from nature and natural law. And I say this because this concept, the prosumer, is actually an incomplete picture for creatives to create and channel their best work. It's missing an entirely different element, and that is the integration element. So with the prosumer, I like to think of it as when we're just a consumer, we're just taking our inhale, we're just breathing in with no exhale. So of course you feel stagnant when you only take in. You can't actually live and thrive if you only inhale. We need to both inhale and exhale. You need to both consume and produce. But the integration element is this pause between breaths. This is where we can be consuming by reading books and taking trainings, or eating food, and then we can produce by writing and working with clients and teaching. What's missing in that is this pause between breaths, this integration. And if you are a spiritual entrepreneur, you probably already have some sort of integration practice, like meditation or walking in nature with no podcast playing. But this is also the step in the creation process that a lot of people distract themselves from. I know I do all the time. I love listening to audiobooks, nonfiction, but also lots and lots of fiction. As someone with ADHD, it's like the only way I can get myself to clean is by listening to a junky audiobook for pure entertainment while I do dishes. And it's just so easy to fill this open space where we used to have hours and days and so many minutes of silence and boredom, where it could take hours to walk into town, if we're thinking back to before it was common for people to have cars, which is like only a few decades ago. Or like after dark. Have you ever tried to read without electricity? With just a candle? It's really fucking hard. There weren't as many distractions. There wasn't as much access to information everywhere we turn, every second of every day in our pockets. And yes, technology has opened up so much good in our world, but it's also made it way too easy to distract ourselves from this very necessary integration time. And one of my favorite stories or examples of this is, like, we all know who Albert Einstein is. One of the most famous physicists. He discovered the theory of relativity. And this great mind, this great brain, he wasn't just a scientist. He actually had a side job as working at the Swiss Patent Office. And his big breakthrough, his big idea behind the theory of relativity, one of his most famous works, was while he was working at this patent office. It wasn't when he was actively working in his research lab. It was not when he was actively learning from a teacher. It was when his mind was in this more neutral state. His unconscious mind could be working on stuff. He was mindlessly working at this patent office. So if you feel creatively stuck in any way, think about these three states of mind. The consumption mind, bringing in inspiration, learning. The productive mind, when we're actually producing things, writing, speaking, teaching. And then this integration mind, when our mind is in this more neutral state and more connections can happen. Now, all of these do not have to be in perfect, exact balance. We go through phases with this. I know for myself, if I'm in this deep phase of learning, of taking stuff in from learning from a teacher, afterwards, it's so important for me to swing in the direction of teaching and writing or just in quiet. But I also find that if I'm in this very busy stage of business and I'm creating a lot of stuff and I go for weeks or months without learning new things, taking new classes, my inspiration can actually dry up. So all of these three states in harmony within you, whether you're bouncing back and forth or you're trying to balance them all at once, will bring out your best work. And another story from myself was one of the last videos we put out on this YouTube channel about the Regenerative Business Zones, which is such a core piece of my teachings within the Regenerative Business ecosystem, my membership, within my larger trainings, is the Regenerative Business Zones. And that entire concept, that entire framework came out while I was on a long hike with my husband. We had left our phones behind and we were hiking amongst the trees, and this idea just came in and I had to take notes about it. I do think that this integration time is the thing that most people in this modern day and age just don't have enough time for. So carving out that time is incredibly important. Now, if you're not a meditator, it doesn't have to be meditation. And I mean, maybe you just need a side job at a Swiss patent office or get into knitting or going for a long drive and not turning on the radio. So I invite you this week to look at how are you actually spending your time? What's your balance, the balance that you're striking between consumption, production, and integration? What would happen if you actually started to even those out a little bit? If you consider yourself a creative, if you consider yourself a thought leader, you want to be a thought leader, the integration piece is often the one that most people are neglecting. So it's time to schedule more of that time in. Okay, so next, check out my video on the Regenerative Business Zones. This will help you make it so that your production time is actually getting the results that you want in terms of more clients, students coming into your business, and you're not wasting your time on bullshit activities that don't actually move the needle in your business. And that will allow you for more integration time. So go watch that video next.